Honestly, she thinks she can do whatever she wants, going out to work part-time and staying out this late. Don't you think that's absurd? You're absolutely right. She can't even cook a proper meal, yet she has the nerve to neglect her husband. Unbelievable. My husband's parents, who run a diner, were loudly criticizing me, their voices carrying all the way outside the restaurant. My husband started going to his parents' house to eat dinner alone as if to avoid my terrible cooking. Maybe I should just remarry that girl who works late nights here. The young waitress working at their diner was apparently his mistress. All right, I'll show them. With my father and son as my strongest allies, I was ready for my ultimate revenge. My name is Grace, and I've been married for 16 years, and I'm now a 40-year-old homemaker. After graduating college, I got a job, but during my first year, I met a man who worked for a client of my father's company, and we got married. I'm an only child, but my family never pressured me to take over the family business. My mother passed away when I was in high school, and I didn't want to leave my father alone. But my father hoped I would get married and establish a life of my own. Equipped with the cooking skills my mother had taught me, I was eager to be a great wife and fulfill my father's wishes when I got married. My husband, 3 years older than me, came from a family that ran a diner, but his parents had no intention of passing the business on to him. That's why I thought we could focus on building a happy home together. Just when I thought our ideal married life was about to begin, I received a phone call one day. "Hello, Grace. I'm sorry to bother you, but can you start helping out at the diner from tomorrow?" "Tomorrow? That's quite sudden." "Yes, one of our part-time staff quit suddenly and we're in trouble. You're just a stay-at-home wife, aren't you? You have the time, right? Or do you have a problem with that?" I felt uneasy about the sudden request and my mother-in-law's commanding tone, which left no room for discussion. It's true, I had time, but the way she treated me like I was just sitting idle all day rubbed me the wrong way. I thought about refusing, but my husband, who happened to overhear the conversation, chimed in. "Hey, why not help out? I'm working late every night anyway, so it's not like you have much to do sitting at home alone." What exactly did they think being a housewife entailed? Sure, it wasn't the same as owning a business, but it still takes time and effort to run a household. But I knew that refusing would only cause unnecessary tension. Reluctantly, I decided to help out at the diner. The diner was bustling during the day, leaving barely a moment to catch my breath. It was just the three of us, my in-laws and me, running the place. On top of that, they offered deliveries, so while my father-in-law was out, my mother-in-law handled cooking and I juggled waiting tables and washing dishes. By the time work ended, I was utterly exhausted. "Oh, you're worn out already? For someone your age, that's just pathetic." Well, that's how kids these days are. Pampered and spoon-fed by their parents growing up. They don't know the meaning of hard work. Their cutting remarks made my exhaustion even worse. I didn't expect gratitude, but a word of acknowledgement or gratitude wouldn't have hurt. Even after returning home, household chores awaited me. I prepared dinner, served it to my husband, cleaned up the dishes, and collapsed, unable to move a muscle. Maybe it was the unfamiliar workload, but something felt off. I seemed to be getting tired more easily than before. Mondays were the diner's day off, but those days were spent catching up on housework, cleaning hard-to-reach places, and airing out the bedding. Being newly married, I didn't want to slack off on housework, so I pushed myself as much as time allowed. However, I began experiencing frequent dizziness. Another month passed, and while helping at the diner as usual, I started feeling lightheaded and my vision blurred. It was during a particularly busy rush, and my in-laws were running around frantically. I couldn't bring myself to mention that I wasn't feeling well. I ended up messing up orders, miscalculating bills, and finally, in a dizzy stumble, spilled an entire tray of food. Honestly, why do you keep making mistakes? At this rate, you're more trouble than help. Exactly. Knocking over trays of food in front of customers? You're going to drive them away. I apologized, but their scolding barely registered as I struggled to stay conscious. Maybe I should have just said I wasn't feeling well, but did they really have to be so harsh? Those thoughts weighed on me as I made my way home. Even after a full night's rest, I still didn't feel any better the next morning. James had left early for a morning meeting, completely unaware of my condition. Left with no choice, I went to a nearby clinic and was stunned when the doctor told me I was 3 months pregnant. It turned out that my recent bouts of nausea and exhaustion had been morning sickness. I realized I've been losing my appetite and feeling nauseated by the smell of food, but I've been too busy to connect the dots. That night, I told James about the pregnancy. His face lit up as he responded. That's great. My parents were waiting to fire you from helping at the diner anyway, so now you can stay home and focus on raising the baby. I was glad he was happy. But the way he casually said fired didn't sit well with me. Still, I'd always envisioned dedicating myself to homemaking and raising children after marriage, so I let it slide to avoid unnecessary conflict. I thought this time, surely, we could get back to the ideal married life I had dreamed of. Months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. James promised to work harder for our new family, but that just meant even longer hours at the office. Honestly, I wished he would help out more while our son was still a baby. But how could I complain when he was working hard for his family? Even so, being the sole caregiver was far more overwhelming than I'd ever imagined. The only thing that kept me going was the sheer joy of watching my son grow during this precious time. But every Monday, my in-laws would barge into our house, taking advantage of their day off. Of course, I just wanted to see my precious grandson. Look how easy you have it. All you do is take care of the baby and nothing else. On the other hand, when James was a baby, I was juggling his care and running the diner at the same time. Now that was hard work. You're lucky to have such a successful husband like James. You know, it's all thanks to us putting him through a top-notch college. Their comments were always laced with condescension. Their weekly visits turned what should have been a joyful time with my son into a source of constant stress. Not long after my son started elementary school, he made a surprising suggestion. Mom, I want to start swimming lessons on Mondays. Even at his young age, Ethan must have found their visits as tiresome as I did. Understanding his feelings, I decided to enroll him in swimming lessons. At first, the swimming lessons worked, giving us a reprieve from the in-laws' constant visits. But somehow Susan found out and called me. What's going on? Every time I drop by recently, you're not home. And I heard Ethan started swimming lessons. If that's the case, I'll handle the drop-offs and pickups. You should stay home and focus on the housework. With a sigh, I broke the news to Ethan. Your grandparents want to take over dropping you off and picking you up from swimming. What? I don't want that. Why can't you be the one to take me, Mom? Ethan looked upset, but much like me, he had a habit of tiptoeing around Susan and Jeff. Reluctantly, he agreed in the end. For a while after that, their meddling seemed to die down, and we enjoyed a semblance of peace. Time passed, and Ethan was now approaching his final year of middle school. He expressed a desire to attend a private high school, and I started considering returning to work to help support that goal. James, I'm thinking of going back to work. What do you think? Sure. Why don't you go back to helping out at my parents' diner again? They're getting older, and right now they only have one young part-timer. It's the perfect solution, and I'm sure everyone will feel the same way. I couldn't agree to his suggestion right away. Memories of the diner flooded back, memories of exhaustion, criticism, and thankless work. The way Susan and Jeff had treated me back then still stung. Their biting words echoed in my mind. I know you don't get along with my parents, but you can't avoid them forever. Sooner or later, we'll have to take care of them. They're not getting any younger, you know? I nodded vaguely, but the thought of taking care of them someday sent a chill down my spine. Still, I resolved to put aside my discomfort and approached my in-laws about helping out. Would you like me to start helping out at the diner again? What? I don't remember asking for your help. We got a young, reliable part-timer. We don't need your help anymore. You see, we're perfectly fine managing on our own. If you understand, just leave already. Their dismissive response was both a relief and a subtle sting to my pride. Back home, I told James what had happened. Surprisingly, he didn't seem fazed. Figures. I wasn't counting on them saying yes anyway, so no big deal. What's that supposed to mean? You're the one who suggested helping out at the diner in the first place. Oh, nothing. Something about his response felt off, like he was hiding something. The next day, I began looking for a different part-time job. Luckily, I found a position at a nearby deli, and they hired me on the spot. At my new workplace, most of my coworkers had young children or elderly parents to care for, so they often had to take time off. Because my schedule was more flexible, I frequently stepped in to cover for them. Everyone has their own struggles. I guess it's just the way things are. But as I took on more shifts, it became harder to keep up with things at home. The worst were the weekends. I come home to find James glaring at me for not being around. Hey, can't you even balance your part-time job with housework? I'm sorry. I got home later than expected, but I'll get dinner ready right away. Forget it. Just go to my parents' house and eat. Your cooking's not worth the trouble of waiting anyway." And just like that, he'd leave the house. Soon, this became the routine every weekend. Eventually, I stopped bothering with real meals and relied on frozen dinners and instant foods. A few months later, I noticed James wasn't even coming home on weeknights anymore. I assumed he was spending more time at his parents' place, so one evening, I decided to stop by the diner and see for myself. When I arrived, I saw a closed for preparation sign still hanging on the door, even though it was already 6 p.m. Feeling uneasy, I approached the door, and that's when I heard voices from inside. Honestly, that wife of his, running off to her little job and not even coming home at a decent hour. She can't even cook, and she's neglecting James like it's no big deal. Then, a younger woman's voice, one I didn't recognize, joined the conversation. "Oh, come on, don't get so upset. I can cook for James if it's that big a deal. Honestly, her cooking's awful. I'd be better off building a life with someone more capable like you." I love that. Someone like you would be a much better fit for our family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who was she? The way that young woman was speaking to my husband seemed way too friendly to be just an acquaintance. Gathering my courage, I peeked through the crack in the door. There they were, James and a young woman laughing together like an inseparable couple. I couldn't confront them right then and there. All I could do was quietly leave, my mind racing with disbelief and anger. As I walked back to my car, I heard a voice call out from behind me. "Mom!" "Ethan? What are you doing here? Isn't this the opposite direction from your tutoring center?" Seeing my son standing there, I couldn't hide my surprise. "I came home and saw you leaving the house looking upset, so I followed you. I was worried." His words struck me hard. My distress had been obvious enough for him to notice. "I'm so sorry, honey. You shouldn't have had to see me like this." "Mom, are you okay? I heard some of what they were saying in the diner." I stopped in my tracks at his words. "You heard that?" "Yeah, Dad and that woman were talking about something, weren't they? It's been bothering me for a while." What he said next shocked me. During summer break, Dad would often bring those people to the house, and in the afternoons, Grandma and Grandpa and that woman. My eyes widened in disbelief. They'd order sushi and eat together, talking about you. Bad things. They even discussed how to get you to divorce Dad. My mind went blank as his words sank in. "Are you serious? They really said that in front of you?" "They made me promise not to say anything to you. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to hurt you." Placed my hand on his head and pulled him into a quiet hug. "It's okay, Ethan. I've already decided what I'm going to do." When we got home, I packed our things and decided to head to my parents' house. I told my dad everything and he nodded, his expression serious as he spoke. "We can't let this go on, Grace. For you and Ethan, we're going to handle this properly. What are you planning to do? First, we'll need to gather solid evidence of the affair. Once we have that, we'll make sure they take full responsibility." My dad contacted a private investigator and the process of gathering evidence began. For the next few days, Ethan and I stayed quietly at my parents' house. "Mom, it feels really at home here. It reminds me of when I was little, when we used to come here all the time." "That's right. But this time it is different, Ethan. We're here to start building a new future." While waiting for updates from the investigator, I spent a few peaceful days with my father and Ethan, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Dad would tend to the garden, chatting with Ethan about the times they'd spent together when Ethan was little. "Remember when we put out seeds and that little bluebird came back every morning?" "Yeah, I remember. I even gave him a name, Sky." Seeing Ethan smile like that lightened my heart, even if only a little. But when the call from the investigator finally came, the tension returned in full force. We've gathered substantial evidence of the affair. Photos, recorded conversations. We have everything you'll need. When I held the evidence in my hands, a wave of anger and sadness hit me all at once. I can't believe it had to come to this, that I even needed this kind of proof. It's because we have this that they'll be held accountable. Be strong, Grace. You're doing the right thing. The next day, I called James and told him I'd be coming back home for the first time in weeks. "Finally! What the hell have you been doing for the past 10 days? Get home and clean up all the mess you left behind." "All right, I'll be there soon." After hanging up, I headed to the house with Dad and Ethan by my side. When we arrived, James was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. "What's your dad doing here? Didn't I tell you to come back alone?" "Why?" "Because this house is in my father's name, and we're here to start the process of dealing with it." "Dealing with it? What do you mean?" When I stepped inside, the sight of the chaos took my breath away. The kitchen was littered with garbage and the laundry was piled sky high. See? You're crazy to think that I'm having an affair. Look around. No sign of another woman anywhere. As James gloated, I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out the evidence collected by the investigator. Then what's this? Photos of you and your friend going in and out of a hotel. The color drained from his face as he stared at the pictures. This has to be a mistake. How did you even get these? That would be the work of the investigator I hired. And you're going to pay for what you've done to my daughter and grandson. By the time Susan and Jeff arrived, it was clear James couldn't talk his way out of this. What's all this? Somebody better start explaining. Susan, you're involved too. I know all about how you schemed to get me out of the picture with her. As Susan's voice rose in pitch, Jeff seemed to realize the gravity of the situation and gently tried to calm her down. Hold on now, everyone. Let's just calm down and figure out what's going on here. What's going on? You and Susan know exactly what's going on. You've been covering for James's affair, helping him plan a new life with that woman. And to think you discussed it right in front of my son? Ugh, unbelievable. As I said those words, Susan's expression changed and she fell silent. Jeff averted his eyes, letting out a deep sigh. James, with all this evidence, don't you think it's time to own up to what you've done? It was just a fling. It didn't mean anything. A fling? Do you even realize how much pain that fling has caused me and Ethan? At that moment, Ethan stepped up beside me and stared straight at his father. Dad, just stop. After everything you've done to us, you're still trying to make excuses? James flinched at Ethan's words and turned his gaze away. Ethan, this is none of your business. It's an adult issue. Of course it's my business. I'm part of this family, and you haven't considered Mom's or my feelings at all. Susan opened her mouth to try to smooth things over, but my father cut her off this time. Enough. I don't want to hear any more excuses. James, it's time you take responsibility for your actions. With my dad's firm words, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Susan, Jeff, any further discussions will go through my lawyer, directly. Neither Ethan nor I will speak with you again. As I spoke, Susan's eyes widened and Jeff's shoulders slumped. James looked like he was about to argue, but my dad stepped forward, his sharp gaze silencing him. Grace and Ethan have me in their corner. If you even think of causing them any more harm, I'll make sure the law handles you. With that, the confrontation ended and we left the house without further conflict. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized and I received a settlement that officially severed my ties with James. Ethan and I began a fresh chapter in our lives, settling into a new home where we could finally enjoy peace. A few months had passed since the divorce, and our lives gradually found a sense of stability. Our new home was in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, just a bit outside the city. Ethan quickly adapted to his new school and even made some new friends. Mom, we had a team project at school today and it was so much fun. Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart. What kind of project was it? It was for history class. We worked on a presentation about the American Revolution, and I was nominated to be the main speaker. Seeing Ethan talk so enthusiastically filled me with a deep sense of relief. I could see him regaining his confidence in this new environment. I, too, embarked on a fresh start by taking a job at a small, cozy bakery. Every morning, the warm aroma of freshly baked bread surrounded me, and it was more enjoyable than I'd ever imagined. Grace, another customer, said our cookies were amazing, especially the ones you made. Really? That's so nice to hear. Maybe I'll try out some new recipes next week. Through my work at the bakery, I became friends with locals and my world began to expand. With a bit more free time on my hands, I rediscovered hobbies I hadn't touched in years. One of my favorites was quilting, a skill my late mother had taught me. Ethan, don't you think this new quilt will look perfect on your bed? Yeah. Mom, I can't believe you can make something this beautiful. You're amazing. His words of praise made me blush, but I couldn't help feeling proud. My dad often came over, and it became our tradition to have dinner together. Ethan, how's the seasoning on this stew? Your grandpa's still got it, doesn't he? Yeah, Grandpa, it's really delicious. Can you teach me how to cook like this? Our dinner table was always filled with laughter, strengthening the bond we shared as a family. Ethan began talking about his dream of one day taking over his grandfather's company. Mom, I want to study business in college and make Grandpa's company even bigger. Oh, that's a wonderful dream, Ethan. I know you can make it happen. Every time I saw Ethan's hope for the future, it brightened my own outlook on life. The hardships of the past became valuable lessons, making the happiness we now enjoyed all the more precious. Our new life was just beginning. I've learned through this journey that no matter how hard life gets, if you keep moving forward, a new path will always open. And by my side, I had a family that supported me and a son with big dreams for the future. Together, we will continue walking forward, stronger and closer than ever.